Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you're having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. When I was a little kid growing up, my dad, Marcus, was my best friend. He worked multiple jobs to support our family while also busting his butt through law school at night. Marcus even started a couple of small businesses from the ground up with a couple of his buddies. Despite all that, he was still the most amazing dad ever, spending every free minute he had with my mom Sophia, me, and my younger brother and sister. One day we got the devastating news that he had stage 4 stomach cancer, the kind you just don't recover from. Mom and I were by his side the entire time until the very end. The last memory I have of my father was when he was completely bedridden, basically a vegetable at that point with tubes everywhere, and me just praying he'd still recognize his son. All the guy could do was smile at me, letting me know he remembered who I was, even though the doctors warned most of his memories would be gone. Eventually, he slipped into a coma for a few days before briefly waking up to say goodbye to Mom, who never left his side, as he passed away. Since Mom was a stay-at-home wife, we were left with almost nothing after he died. Enter my grandfather, Robert. He was one of those self-absorbed boomer types who made everything about himself. After Dad's death, he'd flaunt the newspaper obituary boasting about his dead son's grades and accomplishments, which I realized was seemingly the only thing my dad meant to him. Just to give you some context, yes, we're an Asian family. Mom was grieving and struggling to figure out how to support us, so Grandpa generously offered to help manage Dad's 2 small businesses to provide us with income. Mom agreed since she didn't have any business experience herself. While we were growing up, the 2 companies didn't provide much for our family, likely because Dad was the key reason they had been thriving before. Mom took whatever job she could find just to keep us afloat. Grandpa offered to help pay for me and my siblings' educations. Luckily, I scored some good scholarships, so he didn't have to contribute much for me, but we were grateful for his assistance with my brother and sister. After I finished school, I found out our family was broke and my younger siblings were still making their way through medical school. My sister Leah even offered to drop out and just get a job, but I insisted she keep going since she was doing so well and deserved to become a doctor. That's when my grandparents cut us off completely because they didn't approve of the career paths my siblings chose, especially Leah becoming a doctor, which was apparently too unladylike for Grandma's outdated misogynistic views. Why are you wasting your time and money on this? You're just going to have kids and quit your job anyway. I was teaching high school when one of Dad's old business partners from one of his companies contacted me. After I asked how the company was doing, he dropped a bombshell. My grandfather, who was still in control of Dad's ownership shares, had been embezzling money from the company for himself all these years. He was pocketing way more than he ever gave me and my siblings for our educations. So our entire lives, Grandpa had been making us feel indebted to him for money that should have been ours to begin with. He lied, telling us Dad's companies weren't profitable at all. We also realized that when he cut us off financially, he was really just cutting us off from our own rightful inheritance, forcing my siblings to abandon careers they'd worked their whole lives for. What's even worse is that this was our father's hard-earned money that he wanted us to have to build our own futures. And here was his selfish father basically spitting on his legacy for personal gain. I even uncovered that Grandpa abused his position to take over the company's prime office space for himself, forcing them to relocate to a smaller, crappier office, while he turned around and rented out the original space to the company's competitors to make even more money off them, all while I had to work multiple jobs to help Mom and my siblings just get by. That's when I started plotting my revenge. Grandpa's biggest weakness has always been his massive pride and ego. I think deep down, he wanted us to believe he was supporting us out of his own generosity so everyone would see him as a hero, when in reality he was financially strangling us the entire time. I got Mom, Leah, and my brother Kyle to sign a statement acknowledging that as my father's next of kin, we were the rightful owners of his company shares, not Grandpa. I then approached the entire board of directors, excluding Grandpa, to let them know I was now the sole representative of my late father's estate. Grandpa had also appointed himself as board chairman years ago. According to records, he did zero actual work for the company, so it was just a cushy title that allowed him to collect money. So I convinced them that since he was only chairman as my dad's representative, that made me the new chairman by default. I didn't actually want to keep that position long term since I lacked the experience, but I needed it temporarily to pull off my long con. I also contacted other relatives about Grandpa's shady deal renting out the original office space, and they pressured him into terminating the lease with the company's main competitor. Serves them right for conspiring with him in that underhanded setup. At the next board meeting, the moment I'd been waiting my whole life for finally arrived. When Grandpa strutted into the conference room to preside as chairman, he found his chair turned away from the table with all the board members already seated. Like a scene from a cheesy movie, I spun his chair around to reveal I had been sitting there running the meeting. I told him flatly that the company and my family no longer needed him around, and that I would be taking over handling my father's estate and assets. "Do you know I'm the one who paid to put him and his good-for-nothing siblings through school?" he sputtered in shock. "No," I replied calmly. "Dad did, with his own money." The look of utter humiliation and defeat on his face was priceless. I had never seen the arrogant old bastard look so small in my entire life, and this kind of satisfaction could never have been achieved by simply ratting him out. After that meeting, I stepped down from the chairman role and took a modest job in the company's accounting department as a staff bookkeeper. But at least now any profit sharing or dividends released would go directly to me and my family, right where my father wanted it. One of the first decisions I made as a temporary board member was to finally give my mother Sophia the stable job at the company that she deserved after all her years of struggle. As for Grandpa, he's now unemployed and miserable. He spends his days moping around the house, and because he spent his entire life being so selfish and egotistical, he has no friends. All he ever had going for him was being able to lord over others and brag about his wealth and accomplishments. Even Grandma has had enough of his crap, and they don't even sleep in the same room anymore. I hope he lives out the rest of his hopefully short life regretting that he never had any real compassion or humility. The next one is an entitled people story. I've lived in my cozy little house on Oak Street for nearly 15 years now. It's nothing too fancy, just a simple 2-bedroom place with a small yard out front. But it's my special haven, a refuge from the stresses of the world. Ever since I bought the property, I've taken pride in maintaining it nicely. My lawn is always neatly mowed, my flower beds overflowing with blossoms. The pale blue exterior and white trim look freshly painted each year before the holidays roll around. Inside, I've decorated in neutral tones accented with pops of color, my personal style shining through. In short, I've made my house a home filled with coziness and charm. It's my private sanctuary, a space solely for me to relax and recharge. Or at least it was until the infamous Karen moved in next door. I first met her on a sunny Saturday morning as I was planting some tulip bulbs along my front walkway. A shrill voice called out, "Excuse me." I glanced up, trowel in hand, to see an angular woman with over-teased blonde hair marching purposefully across my lawn. Can I help you?" I asked hesitantly. "Yes, you're making a mess over there. All that digging is getting dirt everywhere," she huffed with annoyance. Taken aback, I simply murmured an apology and continued my work. After a few minutes, she was at it again. "Do you have to do that right now? The noise is giving me a headache," Karen complained loudly. Biting my tongue, I replied politely that I was nearly finished. Thankfully, she stomped back to her own yard after that. Little did I know that this encounter marked just the beginning of the never-ending nightmare brought on by my new neighbor, Karen. Over the next few weeks, she became a constant thorn in my side. Hardly a day went by without her finding something to critique or complain about regarding my property. If the mailman accidentally stepped on her lawn, she accused me of sending him that way on purpose. If a neighbor's dog barked, she insisted it was my dog and made a huge fuss over it. No matter how reasonably I responded or how calmly I addressed her concerns, Karen remained convinced I was out to get her. One fateful Saturday, things came to a head. I was relaxing on my patio, sipping iced tea and reading, when I heard the familiar click of heels on pavement. Bracing myself, I peered over my book to see Karen striding purposefully up my front walk with an ominous manila envelope clutched in her bony fingers. "I've had enough of your antics," she announced coldly before I could even open my mouth. "This property should have been mine, and I'm taking it back." I gaped at her, utterly confused. "What on earth are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb with me," Karen snapped. "My great-grandfather bought this land decades ago. Somehow you schemed and manipulated to steal it right out from under my family. But now I have the deed right here proving it's mine." She shook the envelope victoriously. I was stunned speechless for a moment before finding my voice again. Karen, that's absolutely ridiculous. I bought this place legally from the previous owners years ago. I have my own deed and documents. You must be mistaken. Liar, she shrieked. I want your set of keys immediately. As the rightful owner, I'll be moving in first thing tomorrow morning. Realizing she was completely delusional, I tried to reason with her calmly. Let's take a look at the deeds together and sort this out. But Karen would have none of it. She immediately pulled out her cell phone and jabbed in 3 digits. You'll be hearing from the police, thief, she spat viciously before storming off. My head was still spinning when 2 officers arrived 10 minutes later. Karen instantly launched into a tirade against me, spewing wild accusations about how I apparently stole her family's legacy. The officers listened politely before asking to see each of our deeds. It's clear there's been a misunderstanding here, the sergeant said after examining the documents. Ma'am, I'm afraid there's no record of your family owning this property. This woman's deed and paperwork are all in order. Karen's face turned an impressive shade of magenta. That's impossible. I demand you arrest this crook immediately, she shouted. Sighing wearily, the officer turned to me. Sorry for the trouble, ma'am. You have a good day. With that, they tipped their hats and departed, leaving a spluttering Karen in their wake. She continued shrieking after them, threatening to have their badges. With a satisfied smile, I gently closed my front door, shutting out her commotion. I breathed a deep sigh of relief knowing the law was on my side. The following week, I had my attorney send Karen an official letter advising her to cease all contact with me and stay off my property. Thankfully, she complied, clearly embarrassed by her outlandish behavior. These days, I simply wave politely if I see her on the street. Meanwhile, I continue happily tending to my little haven, treasuring it all the more for having protected it from my delusional neighbor. She may have fanciful dreams about owning my home, but this place belongs solely to me, and Karen won't ever get her hands on my keys. The next one is a petty revenge story, some necessary backstory. I have a complicated relationship with my uncle Jeff, who is older than my dad. When I was a kid, I thought of him as the stereotypical cool uncle. He played guitar, rode a motorcycle, that kind of stuff. I always wanted to hang out with him. As I got older, I started noticing there was always some tension between him and my dad, but my dad assured me it was family drama from before I was born, and not to worry about it. Whatever the drama, Jeff never let it affect his treatment of me, so he was still cool in my book. Now, Jeff may have been a cool uncle, but apparently he was very bad at being a husband. As of me writing this, he has had 5 ex-wives. There was no abuse or violence or anything. He was just an emotionally unavailable guy, and every subsequent wife got sick of his behavior and left. This story is about wife #5. I met her for the first time at a family brunch when I was probably 14 or 15. She had a very unusual name, important for later, so let's call her Ophelia. Ophelia was very sweet to me all afternoon, no red flags, nothing. But after my parents and I returned home, I caught my mom sitting on her bed, crying. My dad was worried, asking her what happened, and after eavesdropping for a bit, I caught snippets of how Ophelia was cold, rude, and nasty to my mom all afternoon. And it was only my mom that she did this to, at a table with about 8 other family members. My mom couldn't figure out why or what she had done to make Ophelia treat her like that. As far as I could tell from my teenage vantage point, she had done nothing wrong. Ophelia was, apparently, just mean to her for no reason. Now my mom is tough as nails. She was born and grew up under a military dictatorship in a foreign country. The point being, she does not cry, so whatever it was, it must have been bad. I did not know exactly what Ophelia said, but I know one thing. You make my mom cry, you are on my list. Later that year, Jeff and Ophelia came over for a summer barbecue with a bunch of our neighbors. If you are wondering why we bothered inviting them after all that, my parents believe in forgiveness and staying close with family even through difficulties. I, however, am a petty teenage girl at this point. I gave Jeff a welcome hug, and then as I hugged Ophelia, I said loudly, "It's so good to see you again, Jane." Jane was Jeff's wife #1. Ophelia looked shocked, but I guess she chalked it up to an accident or just dumb teenage memory because she just kind of took it in stride and reminded me of her unusual, impossible-to-forget name. I apologized, and the barbecue went on without another hitch. The next year, Mother's Day brunch with my grandma, my parents, Jeff, and Ophelia. I greeted her again by calling her Hannah. You guessed it. Wife hash 2. Another summer barbecue that year. I called her Miranda. Wife hash 3. Unrelated, but Miranda was my favorite of his wives. Yes, I realize I am making my uncle sound like Henry VIII. By this point, I do not know if Ophelia thought I had genuine memory issues, but it was so satisfying watching the way her face would go red and her lips would pinch every time I got her name wrong. I would smile every time like I made an honest mistake, which I am sure annoyed her more. I never got around to calling her by wife hash 4's name, Jenna, because whatever old family drama happened suddenly flared up again, and Jeff and my dad stopped communicating altogether. There was some fallout from that over the years, like Jeff and Ophelia trying to trick my dementia-addled grandma into changing her will in their favor, which was my final straw with my uncle. But otherwise, I have not heard from them since. And if you are wondering if Ophelia managed to stick it out as wife hash 5, you should know that I signed up for Ancestry to start making a family tree, and by pure happenstance, I found Jeff and Ophelia's divorce papers in the online records. Good luck to wife hash 6, I guess. The next one is a malicious compliance story. This story happened within the last 20 years, back before germs were a thing. I worked at a restaurant that I can only describe as, well, eclectic. Quiescence was like a mix between a Mumford & Sons video, an Applebee's, and my aunt's house. Glass doors to get in the place, hidden on the back part of farm property, very hard to find. Imagine an unintentional speakeasy. How I got the job as expo here is quite the story as well, but I'll stay on point. My job was basically to make sure all food that went out to guests was perfect. At this place I did a lot of serving as well, despite never being assigned tables. When times were slower, I would entertain the staff by balancing plates, silverware, tureens while pretending to trip. I would take my right foot mid-stride and tap the front of it to the back of my left foot, making my whole upper body lunge forward appearing to trip. It was a crowd pleaser, and important info for later. One beautiful night a woman came in by herself, screaming of food critic, and was seated at Kara's fairly new server section. I made sure all of her stuff was extra on point, a little heavier on the sauce, etc. Like clockwork, the diner drops her fork. Kara was super on top of it, said, "I'll get another one for you, ma'am," and went, washed her hands, and returned with a new fork. As soon as she began to place the fork down, the critic yells, "Oh my God, could you bring a fork that you haven't touched all over the place?" Kara was taken aback, as was I, closely watching a potential food critic. She came back toward me nearly in tears, saying, "This is the 15th stupid bullcrap thing that's happened today. I'm so done, RJ." I consoled her and said, "I got this, hang tight," which was code for check out this crap that's about to happen. Cue malicious compliance. I come out from behind the server station with all the flair of a campy magician, using my left hand to flail my imaginary cape off of me as I tango strutted directly towards Food Critic's table, making sure she saw me, and my theatrics guaranteed she would continue to hold my gaze. My right hand held out an extended index finger as I continued to tango towards her with a shiny new fork, perfectly balanced on it. It was a longer walk than I had prepared for, so I slip coolly back into normal stride. Then I pretend to trip as the fork lunges toward her, but never leaving my finger. She flinch-shouted so bad it was comical, and all I could say was, "Your fork?" as I'm choking back laughter. I quickly turned back around, flipping my imaginary cape again, and was concerned at first because all I could see was the very top of Karis updo. Crap. She missed it? Nope. She was buckled over in tear-filled laughter. The next one is an entitled people's story. I work part-time at a veterinary hospital. They have a regular client who is a wealthy woman. I'm 19, M. It was my first time meeting her. I don't know her age. She was older than 35 for sure. She ended up tipping me, personally, and while making that very clear, $100, because I helped stay with her dog over the weekend, at the clinic. The woman clearly loves her dog, and I thought the tip was because she was grateful. While giving me this money, she gave me some compliments and joked about wanting to take me out on a date. I politely declined, assuming she was not serious. I tried to give her money back. She said something like, "Maybe another time. You keep this," referring to the money. She leaves in good spirits with her dog. I give the money to the clinic. I get a call 3 days later from a colleague who is complaining to me about how this lady keeps asking for me at the clinic. A few more days go by and I'm back at work. The owner tells me she has been demanding for her money back because I lied to her. They have sent her away each time and have also threatened to remove her as a client. The owner wanted to get my side of the story. That same day, the lady shows up because someone got fed up with her calls on their shift and told her when I'd be next in. Here's where it got kinda crazy. She, I'm not kidding, demands, you do what I say. I don't even know how to respond. It's the first thing she comes up and says. I just raise a brow. And she adds, I paid you. I'm calm. I try to clarify. What exactly did you pay me for? She refuses to explain. Now she just wants her money back. I'm not about to argue over this, and I don't want to make the clinic pay. I tell her I don't have $100 on me at the moment, but I'll get her money. She grabs my arm and tries to lead me out to her car. Let's go, right now. A colleague quickly pulled cash to give to the woman. She said, I don't ducking need that, then called me a racial slur. She left the money on the ground. At this point, the owner told her she needs to leave, and she is no longer a client at his practice. A police report was also made, so she's not allowed on the premises. This is probably one of the top 10 weirdest things that has ever happened to me. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.